Hi there, this is Prita, and I am here to do Ask a Witch. I am in a place where the weather's pretty crazy, so I just will let you know that if we lose signal. We're having winds over some of the mountains here in excess of 100 miles an hour, and there was a tornado that touched down just west and a little north of here. So yeah, it's a little wild in the Pacific Northwest today. So today I'm going to talk about Yuletide and the meaning of the holiday, some of the traditions, some of the rituals I've done over the years, and just some of the considerations that you might want to think about for tomorrow. The solstice is midday tomorrow, so it's kind of up to you how you want to celebrate it. The solstice marks the shortest day of the year, and so that would be tomorrow. And then after that, the days will start to get longer. The solstice ranges between the 20th and I think the 23rd. So it can be any time in there. This year it's the 21st, which is Friday. And we also have a full moon on Saturday, which is pretty auspicious. A full moon and a Sabbath pretty much together is pretty amplified energy-wise. So the celebrations of the solstices and equinoxes are actually relatively new compared to the cross-quarter days. And I talked about this a little bit when we talked about some of the celebrations like the fire festivals like Beltane being more ancient. They tend to be right at the beginning of seasonal changes and mark agrarian holidays. The original peoples of the British Isles and European nations of today in northern areas were various varieties of Celtics as well as other tribes. And the Celts, the original Celts celebrated the seasonal or agrarian changes. The solar events were brought into it by the Saxons. When the Saxons came, they were sun worshippers, and so they brought their solar celebrations with them. And after a while, they got fused together as part of a one pagan tradition that the church classifies anyone outside of Christianity as being pagan. But the natural events, holidays were fused together, and so today we have 8 Sabbats, but originally there were 4 until the solar events were added in. Now the solar events, the cross-quarter days are exactly 6 weeks before and 6 weeks after the cross-quarter days. So the year is divided into 8 cross-quarters, or 8 quarters. So we have, like, for example, with Yule is the shortest day of the year, and 6 weeks from now, we'll be celebrating the February 1st or 2nd, which is Imbolc, depending upon your tradition. And that is, in the old days, was considered the beginning of spring. Now, in a lot of places, like California and Oregon, and most of the U.S., in fact, except for the extreme north areas, most of the things that you're going to plant in the garden or nurseries plant for sale in the spring is planted in February. So we know that that's the plant cycle. We've taken plants from a lot of other places, and a lot of things we like to grow in the garden are Mediterranean plants, so they have to be started in greenhouses pretty early. But in other areas of the world where those plants are from, they would be started in February. And you'll notice also that that's when you first start to see things like crocus and daffodils and things like that. The first flowers start to come up and bloom at that time. And so going back to Yule being the shortest day, depending upon where you are on the earth, in the northern hemisphere, the day is going to vary in length. Here in the Pacific Northwest, the sun comes up and it came up this morning at about 8 a.m. and it went down at about 4:15 p.m. So the day's pretty short. I know when I've been in Scotland in the winter, which is further north than here, I've seen the sun come up at 10:30 in the morning and go down at 3 or 3:30. So the day is considerably shorter the further north you go. And this has to do with the rotation of the Earth and the axis of the rotation of the Earth around the sun and the axis of the Earth and the which side of the Earth is facing the sun at this time of year. So it's one of the reasons why we have long periods in the Arctic of, darkness and then long periods of light, because that angle has to do with that. Now, in the ancient days, I know the Saxons celebrated the solstices. It was one of the elements was a battle between the Holly King and the Oak King. The Oak King presides over the light time of the year, and the Holly King presides over the spiraling in or dark time of the year. In order for the sun to return, the Holly King must be slain or sacrificed. And so it's one of the reasons why holly is a common decoration that we still use today to indicate that it is Christmas time, because Christmas time is been synchronized by culture to be at the same time as winter solstice. There's actually quite a lot of accounts that say if Christ was a real person, he was actually, according to the astrology, was probably born in the summer, July, I think. So not born in the middle of winter. The early Christians synchronized Christ's birthday with the return of the sun, or return of the Son of God, the return of the sun. It's pretty easy to mix those two things together and syncretize those. So that's what's happened there. It was traditional to celebrate Yule at any time within 5 days of the solstice. So in the days of feudal Europe, one of the things that was done was the tradition of the Yule log, which basically was that, during the course of the year, farmers would give a certain percentage of their stores to their laird or their king, and then at solstice it was the job of that person to feed the community. And so the community would get together and go find a really big log, cut down a tree, find a really big log, a really big log, and then would take that log and put it in the fire, and then the people were then fed until the log burned out. And so if it was a good hardwood, nice large log, then it would burn a long time and people got to feast for a long time. And so it was kind of a way of the royalty giving back to the people who had given them food all year. So that's one of the traditions. And now the way that has been brought into the modern world is the Yule log, we'll usually get a Yule log, the biggest log we can fit in our wood stove, and if we can, a piece of oak or something like that that's hardwood. And we have pieces of paper and or strings. You can either write your wishes or things that you would like to have happen in the next growth cycle, and tie them onto your Yule log, or staple them onto your Yule log, or tuck them into little cracks in your Yule log. And then when everyone's put their wishes into the Yule log, then it goes into the fireplace and burns. And, you think about what you want, and you could feast or do really anything that you want to do. Now, the significance of this is that, when you live people were living at a time when food storage was a bit more challenging than it is today. And also you had to depend on what you could grow in a year. So you didn't have the option, if you ran out of food, to just run down to the store, So some people didn't have as much as other people did. Sometimes crops fail, or sometimes things just don't produce as much. And if that happened, then you had to, ration your food and eat less. And having a big feast somewhere in the middle of all that might just be enough food to get you over the hump. When you're kind of at the edge of starving for months and months and months, and then you have a day or a couple of days of eating as much as you want, it can carry you through, to as things start to come back. Yule is the time of year when the earth is at its most inward. So it's the most inward spiral. It is a good time for meditation, is a good time for divination, is a good time for sleep, reading, that kind of thing. I know that we like to go out and do a lot of partying. That's not really a good time for that, although, feasting, of course, is part of that. So I guess it really depends on how you go out and do it. But running around in the cold isn't the best idea. Going someplace warm to spend a day or two with friends is probably more traditional. So the Yule log is still a part of modern traditions. It is also done. I've seen communities that do a mock battle between the Holly King and the Oak King. I've also seen communities that, hang holly branches in the house to give thanks, or make an altar to the Holly King to give thanks to him for allowing himself to be sacrificed so that the sun can return. So the idea is that life will be returning. So the celebration is about life returning. And so one of the most common rituals I've been to in relation to solstice and held, one of the things we used to do on the Queen's Ranch in California, we did for a number of years, was set up like a big teepee outside, or a big fire with chairs all around it and blankets and everything, and hold vigil until the sun rose the next day. So since tomorrow's the shortest day, the idea would be to stay up all night, the 21st, and to the 22nd in the morning until the sun rises. And it was a way of being sure that the gods would make sure that the light cycle was coming, that the earth was not going to end. And so, of course, with the light cycle comes food, right? It's when we first animals that we generally see giving birth are lambs, or sheep are having lambs. In fact, Imbolc means the lambing. So we are looking forward to, the renewal of our animals in our field. We're looking forward to the grass coming back to feed them. We are looking forward to the greens that are going to be coming up in a couple of months. And also in colder climates, it's traditional to harvest your honey from your beehives in the spring. And the reason that is because if they made it all the way through the winter and they still got 10 pounds of honey in there, then they don't need that 10 pounds. They're going to be gathering honey again and food again. And so that's the traditional time to take it, to make sure that they have enough to get through the cold winter. So things that celebrate the return of the sun god, or the return of the sun, putting a symbol of a sun on your altar, waiting for darkness and lighting a lot of candles, putting a Yule log in your fireplace or wood stove with your wishes on it, feasting. Gold and silver candles are also traditional. Gold, of course, representing the god who is in the underworld, but is being reborn on this day. So the return of the sun god is the symbolism is the earth mother is giving birth to the sun god. And so the sun god will be born tomorrow, according to tradition. And so we're celebrating that birth of the sun, the birth of the new cycle of life, the renewal of life, and the return of that which is lost in the winter. So that's an important thing to think about when you're doing your Sabbath celebration. Now, there are lots of ideas about this, but certainly depending on the pagan tradition you're a part of, it's important for us to remember that this is the time when the underworld is the closest. And it's also the time, I don't know how many of you have noticed this, but if you think about it, from October 30th through February 1st, we tend to lose more people than any other time of the year. Now, we lost a lot of people during the summer, but we lose a lot more people in the winter, and part of it is, of course, because it's cold and the sunlight is low, but also it's a time when it's easier to travel from this world to the next. And so we, from October 31st to now, really, we are constantly in contact with the dead, with the underworld. We're not as conscious of it, I think, as we get closer to Christmas, because we, are thinking about all the stuff that's going on and how preparing for Yuletide. But I think it's one of the reasons why we have things like Christmas lights, why we have so many lights, is because we're bringing light back into, we've had so much darkness that we're bringing the light back. And that's an important thing to remember. And I think that it's important to remember as you're decorating your house or putting things together for your holiday celebrations, what the meanings of these things are. You think about, like, for example, a Yule tree. Decorating a tree, bringing a tree inside the house and decorating it, is a pagan tradition. It's not a Christian tradition. There are no pine trees in Bethlehem. And they certainly weren't bringing them in and hanging shiny things off them. So that is a pagan tradition to decorate. And in some places in the world, and one of the older traditions that I'm aware of, is that people would also decorate trees outside their house. One of the things that my grandmother used to do, and actually a number of grandparents that I've known, the older generation would often string things like popcorn and cranberries and hang those off of trees outside for the birds, because the birds that didn't migrate, or the birds that are still hanging around, are hungry. And so it's kind of a way to feed the wildlife a little bit during the coldest, darkest point in winter when there's very little food. I just started actually feeding my bees again, just to make sure that they have enough to eat. Their hive is still pretty heavy, but they seem to appreciate it. And, keeping warm is serious business if you're a bee. So, trying to survive through the cold, dark time of the year is a challenge for everyone. It's a challenge for animals. It's a challenge for humans. It's always been remarkable to me that lambs are born right in the middle of all that cold and rain. But they come into the world with a fur coat or a wool coat, so that's not surprising. Their bodies are literally covered in a nice wool coat when they come into the world. So that's they're prepared for winter birth. But most things don't give birth at that time of year. Most of the rest of my animals all wait for spring and summer. And so it also is a time to consider what lies beneath, dealing with things under the surface. Seeds are waiting to sprout. Bulbs are in a holding pattern waiting to grow. Trees are almost all dormant except for evergreens. And everything is ready. I mean, you can go out there and look and feel how supple the branches are and see the new tight little buds on the trees and bushes, but they're nowhere near opening. They will wait for it to be warmer to do that. And so everything is quiet. Everything is in a holding pattern. Everything is very almost in a meditation state. So one of the things that we want to think about is, what does that mean? Being in cave time, this is the deepest, darkest part of the cave. If we're quiet and we listen, what can we hear? And so, I really like this time of year. And the reason that I do is because, so much because of the lights and the gifts and stuff, because that actually is a lot of a distraction for me. But one of the reasons I like it is because it's really a reminder of how abundant the earth is when you are in a place in the year when the earth is not abundant, where everything is asleep or everything is dead. You really miss all the growth and the flowers and the renewal of life, and you recognize and appreciate the gift that is, that those cycles are. The other thing I like about it is, for a farmer, which I definitely am, there is a lot of stuff to do when it's warm. Everybody's giving birth, everybody's eating, need to have more pasture space because they've got babies, and, birds are all sitting on eggs, so they need protection. And then when you have a bunch of chicks, we've had sometimes as many as 100 chicks of various types of birds. You got to protect those. You got to protect your baby. You got to, fix your fences so the little ones can't get out and get in trouble. There's a lot of things that have to be done. And then there's the growing things, getting your garden ready, getting everything in the ground, taking care of everything, setting it all up, and then harvesting and storing. That's most of the year for me. So when things get quiet, which happens right around the end of November, when things are really quiet and everything's done, it's quiet until about February 1st. So I have a couple of months of no babies and nothing to water, nothing to harvest, nothing to care for other than my breeding animals, who are all experienced winterers and know how to hunker down and hide in the hay and cuddle up when it gets cold. And so the only things I have to do is just make sure everyone gets enough eats, make sure the bees can get in and out of their hive, make sure not too much water gets in anybody's enclosure, and watch for babies. That's my job. So it's a quiet time of year, which I very much enjoy because I don't get much quiet as a farmer. And so this winter is very interesting for me because I have never been in a situation where I had to move in the middle of winter. I've always moved in the summer or in the fall, and I've never had to move in January, end of December, January, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm packing up everything and leaving my safe cave and moving to another cave, which will be safer and happier. And so that's an important aspect of this year, is I'll be coming out of the cave in a new place, which is exciting and also a bit terrifying. So we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. But it's, cave time. It's a time to go inward. And so I'll be focusing a lot on making my nest safe and warm, so that I can get ready for spring, because springtime will be an explosion of animals in a new place that we'll have to understand the challenges of. So Yuletide is an important observation of a solar transition, which takes us from the cold, cold winter into the spring. And the energy of it is pretty powerful because it's birth. It's a rebirth of life and the birth of the sun god. So we want to remember that, the sun is coming back. Even though it's very dark and very cold right now, the sun is coming back. And that's reason to celebrate, which is why ancient peoples did. So I hope that that's helpful for you. And I hope that helps you get in more of a mindset of celebrating Yule. If you have any questions or anything you want to say, please feel free to post it below the video. And this is my last video until January 9th, because I'm going to be moving for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to need to be offline. I won't really have a place to do it, or time or mental ability. So I'm going to give you all a couple weeks off to go deeply into the cave and spend some time focusing on your inner work and your preparations for the return of the sun. And then I will see you all again on Wednesday, January 9th. And I also will post this week's and last week's videos on Patreon. So those will be available in the next few days. I'll do that over the weekend. I also will be posting another herbal video on wormwood, and also the vlog on Patreon. So if you're interested in that, it's just patreon.com/CroneWitch with a Y. And also the Ask a Witch videos are also on YouTube. So if it's easier to watch them there in HD, feel free to go there. This is just the easiest way to record them and get them out to as many people as possible. So I hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and I hope you all have a blessed and powerful Yule, since we're looking at a full moon and an asteroid or a meteor shower, as well as the shortest day of the year. So, wow, and all in Cancer, which is watery, inward kind of sign. So I hope that you're able to take some downtime and celebrate. And by that I mean some downtime with yourself. Take a hot bath, read some stuff, meditate, do some things that make you get in touch with your inner self. And I hope you have a blessed Christmas, those of you who celebrate, and a Happy New Year. And I will see you all in January. So love, and I'll see you then.